Hello, viewers from across the country. I'm Nehemiah Frank, founder and editor-in-chief of the Black Wall Street Times. I am your host this evening. We have an amazing panel of parents, educators, anti-racist activists who are ready to delve into the realist conversation about critical race theory. But first, I'd like to thank our national partners, the National Parents Union, for supporting this event. Here is a quick clip about them.
For years, in neighborhoods and communities across the country, parents and families have come together to build a better life for our future, quietly but powerfully, building pockets of parent power across the nation, working together to fight for safer neighborhoods, to end violence in our streets, and stop mass shootings in our classrooms, standing up to fight for economic justice and good-paying jobs, so that parents and families could actually be parents and families, instead of simply fighting for survival without a safe and affordable place to live, and not knowing if there'd be enough grocery money to last until payday, and stopping the endless cycle of generational institutional racism and a blind allegiance to an education system that maintains an addiction to a status quo that pushed out, underserved, and failed us as children ourselves, and expects us to sacrifice our own babies to protect their system because those who have always done it this way are too comfortable. Mothers, fathers, tias, abuelas, grandpas, grandmas, nanas, and papas, fighting for our seat at the table. The National Parents Union was born out of a desire to connect together to ensure that no parent or family will ever have to stand alone again, that no group of parents will ever have to go up against the most powerful political special interest groups in the nation without other groups having their back. That together, we could stand united as the critical missing piece that's keeping America from its true promise of delivering on the dream of a bright future for every single child. And that no one will ever speak for us, for our communities, our families, or our children, but instead, we would speak for ourselves. Our kids, our voice, the National Parents Union.
Love that video. And that was the voice of Carrie Rodriguez, co-founder and president of the National Parents Union. You've probably seen her on CNN and Fox News. This lady ain't afraid to walk into the dark valley to confront bad policies affecting our youth. She'll be joining us a little later on the panel. And speaking of media outlets, some of them claim that parents are fighting their school districts not to teach critical race theory. What they're not telling you is that there are just as many parents and students fighting to keep critical race theory alive in American classrooms. But is critical race theory even being taught in the classroom? After all, critical race theory is a graduate level framework that attempts to explain how the legacy of slavery and segregation in America is embedded in legal systems and policies. Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, said critical race theory is not taught in elementary schools or high schools. She has vowed to fight those who are threatening educators for simply teaching the whole of American history. Now, speaking of teaching the whole of American history, in a high school history class, I learned that the first presence of African enslaved people in America was in 1619, Jamestown, Virginia. And that was over 20 years ago before the 1619 Project was published. And to add some more context, the 1619 Project has become one of the main targets for conservative policymakers. The curriculum is now banned in multiple public school districts across the country. The New York Times published the 1619 Project magazine in August of 2019, 400 years after the first enslaved Africans were brought to North American shores. The award-winning literary project is a collection of essays and stories that claim America was not founded in 1776 when the Declaration of Independence was adopted, but instead in 1619, the year that enslaved Africans were first brought to the land that became the United States. And just as a friendly recap, I learned this in high school in the late 90s. Now, there's an ongoing debate whether or not critical race theory is being taught in classrooms. The president of the American Federation of Teachers says no, yet Vivette Dukes, a New York City teacher, has been teaching about critical race theory to her students before it became such a hot button issue. She's also one of our panelists. So I want to introduce you to our first panelist featured in the NPU video on top of the broadcast, who was taught critical race theory to her students. Vivette Dukes, she is a mom, wife, classroom teacher, writer, educational consultant, and public speaker. She uses her experience, acumen, and platform to eradicate the school-to-prison pipeline and other forms of systemic educational and societal inequities that disproportionately affect Black and Brown communities. She is also the founder of Speak Your Truth. Joining us this evening from the Big Apple, Deputy Director of Organizing for the National Parents Union, Vivette Dukes. Vivette, how are you this evening?
I'm grateful to be here this evening. Thank you for having me as a part of this panel.
Absolutely. So you were teaching about critical race theory before it was even a hot button issue. And to me, like I didn't think that critical race theory was even being taught. Remember, I was a teacher, I was an assistant principal. I didn't really know anything about critical race theory until, I guess it became a really hot button issue in the media. And I've read How to Be Anti-Racist. I see my Greenwood 100 book. Y'all make sure y'all get that. It is about the Greenwood Massacre in my community. I'm really proud of that, it is also like our own version of the 1619 Project in Tulsa. But anyways, define what critical race theory is to you. I know people have different opinions about what it is, but from an educator's perspective, what is critical race theory?
So I think it's important that we frame the conversation tonight to make sure that we're working from a common definition. So when this controversy first began to bubble up, that was one of the first things that I noticed, that this acronym CRT stands for critical race theory. It can also stand for culturally relevant or culturally responsive teaching. So I want to just ground us tonight, first and foremost, into what are we talking about when we say critical race theory. So critical race theory, founded in large part by Derek Bell, says to us that it examines the racist institutions and it works to analyze how these institutions were founded on white privilege and white supremacy, which further perpetuate the marginalization of people of color. So there are some tenets that you have to at least agree to fully be engaged with critical race theory as something you're going to teach in your classroom. What you're seeing now is an actual lesson that I taught. I left the classroom this past school year. I just resigned from the Department of Education less than 2 months ago. And in this past year, this was a lesson that I taught. So if you want to scroll through it, we asked students, this is our aim, students will be able to explain the effects of systemic racism on people individually and on society as a whole. No indoctrination, explain what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, sorry.
And so what grade is this that you're teaching?
9th grade. This was a 9th grade class. What are the effects of systemic racism on people individually and on society as a whole? Again, asking questions. They are going to watch a video about systemic racism from a vetted source. That source came from Upfront magazine, so it's a scholastic New York Times magazine. So,
And yeah, and so Scholastic, I mean, I remember reading that as a kid. So, you know, I don't, so are you saying that there are articles in Scholastic magazine that are talking about systemic racism?
yes, I'm saying
Wow.
that
Okay.
happens a lot. If we scroll, there's video, there's an article, we have our share out. So this is rooted, the framing of this lesson. As I mentioned to you, critical race theory, one of the developers of it, creators of it, is named Derek Bell. So
Mm-hmm.
just for a little context about that author, he was a lawyer, a civil rights activist, an author. He is one of the most influential sources of critical thought regarding this discourse of race relationships. He challenged people to think about, what does the term liberal really mean? What does conservative really mean? And he helped to provide the framework for what is known as critical race theory. And he wrote this short story called The Space Traders. The
Mm-hmm.
Space Traders is of the genre Afrofuturism, and it's built on the premise that this question: if aliens arrived on Earth and said they would pay trillions of dollars in gold to the government for the entire Black population, would that deal be made? And it takes us through a series of journal entries, like the 1st of January, 2nd of January, all the way through the 17th of January, to decide, well, what decision did the government make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in this lesson, as we go through it, there's really, to me, this is a problematic lesson according to critical race theorists, anti-critical race theorists, I should say.
Right. So far, I don't see anything in here that is demonizing anybody's kids.
I'm
So,
asking them questions.
okay.
I'm asking questions. And these questions also are mine, amalgamated with questions taken from that Upfront magazine. So they're grounded in a vetted source again. And they talk about systemic racism in the article from multiple lenses: housing, education, generational wealth.
So has a student ever left your classroom feeling alienated or anything like that? Or
I've received pushback.
mm-hmm.
Why does everything in your curriculum have to be so glum and drum? We could stop sharing that, because then that's my password and stuff for my Google.
Okay, we don't want that to be out there.
But I did receive pushback from some affluent white parents who were not pleased that their child was feeling uncomfortable in the class, or I was asked, why is everything in your curriculum seemingly so glum and drum?
Mm-hmm. And so how did you deal with that as a teacher?
Well, because what I teach is grounded and rooted in knowledge-based sources, is I'm doing backwards planning. There's an end goal. There is an assessment that I'm looking to do. Because I have all my ducks in a row, it was very easy for me to speak to why I'm teaching what I'm teaching, because it's to garner skills.
That's good. Critical thinking skills.
Yes, it's to garner critical thinking skills. So whether it was this text, another text, these are skills-based lessons. What is the skill we want to draw from this lesson today?
Right. So we're going to have Yvette join us a little bit later in the programming. Yvette, thank you so much for explaining how you teach critical race theory in the classroom. So is the critical race theory debate a distraction or a severe indication of a political polarized nation swinging division back into American classrooms out of fear? In some school districts, the critical race theory dispute is so turbulent that education board members have erupted in full-out physical brawls between the left and the right. Some parents are pulling their children out of public schools, not over fears of contracting the COVID Delta variant, but over worries that their children will be taught critical race theory. Making matters worse, parents who bring actual marginalizing issues to their school board meetings, such as the disparity regarding students with special needs, high suspension rates, voices are drowned in the void by the misinformation being hurled concerning critical race theory. At one Georgia school board meeting, A parent made a bold claim that a white Virginia student committed suicide from being forced to learn about critical race theory in the classroom. However, no information could be found on the internet regarding this parent's extreme claim. One Loudoun County Public Schools Virginia parent argued that critical theory itself shouldn't be taught in public schools. Now, critical theory is an approach to social philosophy that focuses on reflective assessment and critique of society and culture in order to reveal and challenge power structures. So is this Virginia parent saying we should pull sociology and civics from high schools, or is she fearful that the power structure she's benefiting from will be challenged even more if American students, regardless of their color, learn about the said structure is civics or sociology class and decided that her power structure is unfair to them and therefore needs to be challenged? Furthermore, high school sociology focuses on many different aspects of human behavior and life. The class covers how ethics vary in different cultures, groups, and societies, the cultural trends that affect how society operates, and how to work well with people from different backgrounds. And who wouldn't want that? America is, after all, the most ethnically diverse country in the world. And whether forced or voluntary, and regardless of one's political leanings, each ethnic group contributed significantly to this nation's existence and progress. Nevertheless, how we teach history and current events in civic history sociology classes may now be cherry-picked and backed by legal ramifications. Education Weekly published that Tennessee aims to levy fines starting at $1 million and rising to $5 million on school districts each time one of their teachers is found to have knowingly violated state restrictions on classroom discussion about systemic racism, white privilege, and sexism, according to the guidelines proposed by the state's Department of Education late last week. Texas Republican state senators voted to ban the teaching of CRT, adding the prohibition against instructing that the Ku Klux Klan was morally wrong. According to the Lone Star State's new law, it is now debatable whether or not the KKK is a domestic terrorist organization. Now, I'm a descendant of a family who survived the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, who were terrorized by the Klan. And I can assure you that you don't want to have that conversation with me. The Texas legislative proposal also states that a teacher may not be compelled to discuss a particular current event or widely debated and currently controversial issue of public policy or social affairs, hence the legalized cherry picking. In Cobb County, Georgia, a school counselor and anti-racism activist resigned her position in protest over the school district's recent ban on using anti-racism materials in the classroom and not addressing Black voices and their concerns of the racism they've experienced while attending Cobb County School District. Jennifer Susko has been a school counselor for 9 years and has experience advocating for systemic racism change at multiple levels of society. She's passionate about doing anti-bias, anti-racist work to increase equity in schools. Jennifer uses critical race theory and culturally relevant teaching to create standards, aligned classroom lessons, and small group curricula that aim to help Black students and students of color combat harmful stereotypes, protect them from the effects of weathering, and empower them to use their voice and actions to create the change they wish to see. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like for you to meet Jennifer Susko, the brave teacher, the brave counselor from the Atlanta, Georgia area, who actually resigned because of all of the controversy surrounding critical race theory. How are you doing, Jennifer?
I'm okay. Thanks for having me, Nehemiah.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about what went down in your county?
Yeah, so I have trained myself on critical race theory as a white school counselor who works with Black and brown students. And I've done anti-racism work for a while. Part of our job as a school counselor, we have to adhere to our school counseling ethics. And that means making sure that all students feel affirmed and a sense of belonging in the school system. So my kids, even though I'm in elementary school, they're impacted by racism. So before I'm going to talk to them about that experience and how it impacts their mental health, I need to understand it through a critical race theory lens to avoid doing any harm as a white woman to, the Black students. So I have trained myself using critical race theory as that lens. And then I have done my school counseling lessons. I think there's a misunderstanding, but we do go in classrooms and teach lessons. And I have to teach lessons on identity. So we talk about race and racism as part of what Black students will experience. And last summer, when the uprisings happened, everybody was like, oh, okay, let's go to Susco because, you know, she always says she uses critical race theory. She does this anti-racism, you know, she fuses that in all of her in her school counseling program. So let's go to her. And I was doing panel left and right. And I was saying, oh, I use critical race theory. Make sure you understand that, you know, the first tenet that racism is embedded in society and your students are going to experience it, that it isn't something that's in the past, that it's current. And I talk to my students about that. So that's a tenet of critical race theory that I share with, you know, we talk about that. But then I was training school counselors on that. And it was very accepted last summer. It was like, cool, awesome. How do we do that? And I was sharing the lessons I use on identity and talking about how I infuse critical race theory and anti-racism. And then all of a sudden this year, all that public stuff that I had done was just demonized. It was like, y'all are saying it's not out there. And here she is saying that she absolutely uses this and we don't want her here. Not from parents in my community at all, but from my parents outside of my direct community.
My goodness. So at some of the school board meetings that I listened to, are you saying that some of the people that spoke were not even from that county?
No, they're from the county, but they're from different parts of the county, like not from the south part of the county or the area where, you know, it wasn't the parents at my school saying that.
Wow. So have you had any, before the fallout, did you have any white parents coming to you and saying, oh, my kid is feeling uncomfortable in school?
No, never. And that's the big disconnect. Like the speaker in the beginning said, I do use critical race theory. And what those parents are immediately hearing is like, okay, you make Black kids feel like victims and white kids feel like they're inherently racist. And that would be completely against school counseling ethics. I've never done that, nor would I. But that's what they think it is. So when they see me like proudly saying I use it, that's what they're thinking that I'm doing.
Wow. So we're going to have you join the panel a little bit later. And thank you so much for debunking some of the myths around critical race theory and educating us just a little bit more on exactly what it is.
Sure.
So now, in all fairness, most conservatives argue that they aren't against teaching the wholeness of American history, but merely don't want their children coming home believing that their American culture is inherently racist. So again, I ask, is this debate really about critical race theory, anti-racism material, or white fragility, which is often displayed by white people when their social environment, or a social environment that protects them and insulates them from race-based stress is suddenly shattered? So I know this conversation can be intense for adults of various hues to collectively have. So I asked my friend Kadada Asamera Gray to join me this evening. Gray works as a conflict strategist and political consultant in the Peach State of Georgia. She has an MS in conflict management and is currently pursuing a PhD in international conflict management. Gray is gifted at facilitating and teaching individuals the skills needed to have difficult conversations while creating safe spaces with truth, honesty, and grace. And here is Kadada. How are you doing, Kadada? Are you on mute?
Uh-oh, I was the first one. Yes, I'm on mute. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do and why it's important to this conversation?
Well, my work is broad, but let me just first say, I love conflict. I study conflict for a living. That's what I do. And the reason for that is because it allows us to ground ourselves in pure reflection of an issue. And then to be able to reflect that back to someone else is truly a skill. And people think that conflict is very high strung. As you said, like we have parents going at it, right? Well, guess what? They do not have conflict resolution skills, right? They just feel like yelling and screaming, which is a technique to make people back down, is a win. That also tells me in my space and in my world, that means also that you have been taught your entire life that yelling and screaming is appropriate, so that way you can get some type of result. And I think when it comes to this issue of CRT, it is challenging because, one, we have an issue versus listening versus hearing. And those are two separate actions, whereby one is giving thoughtful consideration to what you're saying, which is the hearing portion of it, versus listening to, I can hear your mouth moving, but I already have a preconceived notion. In the social scientist in me is so fascinated by this, because if we really understood and if we were really read well enough in terms of what's occurring in the schools, most parents have no idea what's on the history books. No one knows what's actually occurring in schools, if we're telling the truth. I'm a parent. I have 3 children that's gone through Cobb County School District. So I know a lot of parents don't even know what the curriculum looks like. And I also know that CRT traditionally has always been taught at higher level, and it's an elective. So you have to go get a college degree, maybe, but more so you're going to see this type of stuff, this type of theory introduced more so over in more professional degrees, which is your master's level, your JDs, your PhD work.
Mm-hmm. So we're getting ready to have a conversation about critical race theory. Honestly, I don't think there's going to be any conflict going on in this conversation. At least I hope not. I know that these people are very comfortable having conversations about race. But if there were someone that were in this group that were not comfortable having conversations about race, or so let's just say if it was a family member, right? The family member has an issue with their kid dating outside of their race. Like, how do you have that conversation without it becoming an explosive situation?
Well, you have to determine where is that. Well, first, let me not even say determine. We have to learn how to respect where everyone stands. Mm-hmm. And that is very uncomfortable, to be honest, because it is really grading up against something that I believe to be true and that other believes to be true. And when we other people, we totally discount their humanness on both sides. I will be very honest, whether it's mm-hmm. Black and brown bodies against white bodies, we do it to each other. And that is where we cause conflict. When I hear all of this discussion, what is at the heart of this to me, what no one ever talks about, is what white culture deems to be culture for them, right? It's okay for Black and brown bodies to be uncomfortable, but whiteness doesn't see their life as uncomfortable. They see their life as joy and happiness. And when you bring forward conversation in regards to, well, you may have hurt somebody, or somebody like you may have hurt someone else that looks like me, then you get that conversation around, well, wait a minute, why are you making my child feel bad? Why is it so glum? History shouldn't be so glum. Well, guess what? When you aren't taught your own history, and white people are not taught their own history, if we're really truthful about it, they're not taught, because guess what? They don't have to know it. All they know is that they're white. They're living their best lives. They're happy every day. They've got money. The world is good to them. And when you have someone who stands in that framework, it's hard for them to understand I'm causing someone else's pain. That's harmful. And you're just like, well, wait a minute. No, it's not me. Because one of the pieces of critical race theory that people do not talk about is that we're not talking about individual behaviors. I'm not talking about my white girlfriend that I met yesterday. I'm talking about something that happened so many years ago that still is in the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And when you have to talk to someone else where it comes to whether it's dating someone outside of the race, you have to literally respect where they come from. Yeah. That's all you can do. And it's hard because you want to fight your cause and you want to lay down the law and you want to do all this stuff. But I ask on both sides of this conversation, what is that person's experience? Why? How did they get there? Am I in that space? Why does that rub me the wrong way? And if you can have that conversation first and recognize that they are literally coming from someplace else other than me. Because I love the fact that the world is becoming so woke. But I'm challenged by that because I'm like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
People will say, I'm woke all my life. No, you weren't. You were woke probably from the age of 20 or maybe the age of 30 or 35 or 1 year beforehand. But that's something that in and of itself, we tend to eradicate someone else's experiences in the name of wokeness. And that's dangerous, very dangerous, because the moment that you mute the other side, just like we've been done. And I'm a big fan of, let's not use the tools that the oppressed use against us, because it doesn't move us forward.
Right.
It keeps us in a cyclical conflict. And it is. We are literally cycling through, and it's actually an intractable conflict. Since 1690, and there were Black folk on the United States of America's land well before 1690. So this conflict has been occurring repeatedly, and it's actually taking on more shades. I was sitting here, I am just dumbfounded that literally in Texas, they can tell us the KKK was not harmful. So we're metering speech to make kids feel good.
Right. Well, they're debating if January 6th was, an insurrection. So, at this point in time, folks are debating all kinds of things and how to define them, which is, the main reason why we're having this discussion tonight about critical race theory. So Kidada is going to be on standby. Honestly, we're going to throw you on the panel too, Kidada. So if you got something to say, you could definitely say it. It is the moment everyone's been waiting for. 30 minutes, I made you wait. I'm so sorry. I'm going to introduce this panel. So we have John Wasu. I'll make sure. And let me tell you, if I get anybody's name wrong, please let me know, because I definitely don't want to be mispronouncing anyone's names. So John Wasu is a human developer who believes in helping individuals, families, and communities rise in ways that uplift others. He is currently the middle school counselor of the year in one of the largest school districts in the nation, in the beautiful state of Georgia, where he shows scholars how to show up, grow up, glow up, and sew up, while also promoting social, economic, and political justice in and outside the classroom. Next up, we have Carrie Rodriguez, who really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to do it anyways. Carrie Rodriguez is Matthew, Miles, and David's mom and the founding president of the National Parents Union. Carrie is called arguably the most successful parent organizer in education advocacy today. Her outstanding commitment to social, economic, and educational equity for children and families span decades. And if you live in Massachusetts or watch CNN, MSNBC, or Fox, you've heard the name Carrie Rodriguez. Next up, we have Anthony Cherry. There he is, right there. How's it going, kinfolk?
It's going great. Life is good. How are you?
Good. So Anthony Cherry is a James Madison Fellow and received his master's degree in history at the University of Tulsa. He also studied constitutional history at Georgetown University. Anthony teaches history at Holland Hall Episcopal School in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Before that, he taught at Booker T. Washington High School in North Tulsa, home to America's original Black Wall Street. And next up, we have Dr. Therese Johnson. She is an educator, an educational leader, entrepreneur, and teacher. She is a diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice professional. Dr. Therese is an advocate, activist, author, and artist. She is passionate about ethnic and global education and dedicated to multicultural and multilingual learning. She also sits on the Gwinnett County Board of Education in Georgia. Her current term will expire in December 2024. Y'all know who to vote for. Next up, we have Peter White. Peter White is a dad to a third grader and a second grader at Emerson Elementary, which is right down the street from my mom's house, by the way. He's a Tulsa native and a minister. He also works with college students as well as in the corporate world. And last but not least, we have Comfort. Comfort is a former teacher and current foster care recruiter, as well as a foster and adoptive parent. She is chair of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Belonging Council for her current employer, which we will not say the name of this evening. All right, and I'm going to bring back Vivette Dukes, and then we also have Christina Laster, who is also joining us from the National Parent Union. And actually, we can only have 10 people on screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Kadada out. I'm going to bring Christina in, and if anybody acts up, I'm going to bring in. I'm going to bring her back in so she could help us with the whole conflict resolution situation. All right. All right. How are you doing, Christina?
I'm good, and I'm glad that Kadada's there. So if we start acting up, she can come and help us out a little bit.
Right. She's going to make sure everybody's in check. So we're just going to jump right on into some of these hard questions. People are commenting in the comments section, but I do want our panelists to speak tonight. So how do y'all define critical race theory? Because I've watched the different networks talk about it. I've watched different people throw out their opinions about it. Y'all, there was one night I ordered the book and I read it in the critical race theory. I read that book in one night because I was just so obsessed and I was thirsty to find out what this is really about and what people are so scared of. So what is critical race theory to you? Anybody, just bump your hand up or just hop on the floor and start talking. Just don't talk too long though, because we only have so much time.
So can we get real here for just one quick minute? Like Absolutely. All of this drama is a political campaign. We know that, right? It started by Christopher Russo. This is a concerted effort to take our eye off the ball. Okay, this has nothing, I don't think this has anything to do with the idea of critical race theory. I don't think people understand what critical race theory is. Can we get real about the fact that this is an effort to start a culture war to keep our eye off the ball and get us distracted? We need to have a deeply, deeply serious conversation. And many of us have been having this for a generation about the deep inequities that our children face in our public education system because of the generational institutional racism that exists in this system. And we're in a transformational time where we have had an unprecedented disruption, and we have an opportunity. We can sit around and have a deeply ridiculous conversation about a political campaign that this fool has started up because it's easy to appeal to the lowest common denominator. But some of us, like you guys are brave warriors having this conversation. Some of us also need to remember that, like, we've had unprecedented disruption. We have an opportunity to reset the status quo here. And it's intentional that we're having this conversation right now. So I just want to start off by saying, God bless all of you, for engaging in this conversation. But we also have to understand that this is a concerted effort that has been launched by people who don't even know of what they speak. And that's what is deeply frustrating, at least for me as an education justice advocate in this fight right now.
Anybody else?
I agree. As a school board member, I believe it is important for us across our nation to ensure that all of our students are represented in our curriculum, to ensure that the facts are clear in our schools and that all of our students feel like they belong. All of our students should feel like they're seen, heard, represented, celebrated, valued, respected, and celebrated. And so as a school leader, as a policymaker, I am committed to staying focused on not the political rhetoric around CRT, but really focusing on making sure that our students are seen, heard, and valued in all aspects of our educational system. We know that our, counselors and social workers really work on, identity, and they work on, making sure that, our students feel like they belong. And teachers refer students to our social workers, to our counselors, to therapists for additional support. And it's important that we work to support our teachers and our support staff in a way that all of our students feel like they belong. So, for me, CRT certainly is not and should not be a political issue, and we should not be distracted on debating about it as much as we should be focused on how to make sure that everyone is represented and how do we make sure that we support the historical facts in our school curriculums.
And I just want to go ahead and piggyback off that. I think we absolutely need to be super clear on what our purpose is, right? We need to be clear on what our function is, whatever it is that we're doing. And so for me, when I talk about critical race theory, I think sometimes the best way to define a word is to talk about how you can use it. And so I use it as a lens through which we can more effectively see our history and our present and our future. And so I've been wearing glasses since I was in like second grade. And so I would have to go to the optometrist. He would say better 1, better 2, better 3, better 4, right? And I would have to go get fitted because otherwise I wouldn't be able to see clearly and I wouldn't be able to navigate my world effectively. And so what critical race theory does is allow us to look through a microscope or a telescope or whatever scope we need to see so that we can really better understand what it is that we're trying to move through and make better decisions at the individual, the institutional, and the structural level of our society. And to also just speak to what everyone else has been saying, we know that our society for a long time, since the founding of this country, has done a great job of saying one thing and doing a different thing. And it's important for us to acknowledge that we are incongruent in many ways, and we need to acknowledge that reality. So at the same time that the forefathers of this country were writing the founding documents, talking about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and protection from tyranny, right? We also have to acknowledge that a majority of them enslaved Africans, and they also forced those Africans to tend the fields that were bloody with indigenous bodies through genocide of indigenous people. And I think it's important for us to be able to have that conversation and all the different points throughout history that speak to the ways in which the United States has used economic, social, and political injustice to really, create, to perpetuate inequality, essentially. So there are people at the top, and they are using their power and opportunities to maintain that power structure. So at the end of the day, this is very much a distraction. Right, we know throughout history there were Japanese internment camps. We know that immigration issues have been ongoing. We know that no matter what race you are, if you are not white, if you're not considered white, whether you were Italian, Irish, and were able to assimilate into white culture, at some point in time you were an other, and the other was treated negatively in a way that perpetuated inequality for those at the top and relegated people on the bottom of the system. And if the dark you were, and this is still true, the dark you were, the more likely you are to find yourself at the bottom of that system. So one thing that critical race theory does as well is helps us see the connections between all these interrelated systems, right? So in a lot of ways, things are still similar. Yes, there's been a ton of progress and we have advanced in many different ways, but in the same way that Black bodies were still the economic engine for much of society when slavery was legal, when chattel slavery was legal, we still see that today in terms of mass incarceration. And we know that that system is linked to our education system, which is linked to our housing system, and all of these other political systems that are interrelated and lead to similar outcomes, right? So we still see wider gaps between white people and people of color. And we still see that even though progress is being made in some ways, it's getting worse in others, like with respect to wealth and income. And so it's important for us to be able to have all of those different conversations. And critical race theory helps give us a lens to appropriately be able to say that, hey, we know that this student is showing up to school every day and they don't have what they need to study, right? Or they don't have what they need to excel in class. So one way of looking at that is saying, why doesn't that student have what they need? There must be something wrong inherently with that student or with that family or with that community, right? But then we also, with critical race theory, can look at that and say, well, we know that this family is from a community that has been historically marginalized, and resources have been taken from one area and shifted to another consistently. And even when there are opportunities for advancement, they are sometimes limited or taken away. And we have to be able to acknowledge things through that lens if we want to really live up to those values that are truly lofty of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and protection.
John, I think you just explained what critical race theory is. and what we're trying to get, high school students, college students, nevertheless, you have policymakers across the country that are even going as far as passing policies at the collegiate level, that affect the collegiate level, which is just absolutely bizarre to me. So look, y'all, we about to go.
Yeah, Maya, can I say what is not? Because I'm gonna need people to stop wasting board meeting nights, minutes, where parents could be talking about academic outcomes instead of arguing over ethnic studies, Black History Month celebration, whether there should be a Black Student Union or a Mecha Club or a Cinco de Mayo celebration.
Let's go there.
Can we please stop doing that? Because our kids need to have the academic outcomes looked at, the accountability over funding and everything else, and people wasting time. So I really wanted to say what it's not, right? And it really positions the board in a way that is attacking those separate groups, like the African American Parent Advisory Councils, the Black Student Unions, the MECHA. They really have to be very cautious in how they're going to follow anti-discrimination practices while addressing this. And I haven't seen it done in a good way. So we need to really look at that when we're talking about what's happening on the elementary and secondary levels of education. And is this conversation meant for that environment? Because really it's fear mongering that's happening. It's a lot of wordplay and a lot of blatant targeting and attacking. And we really don't know what's setting forth these principles on the board level when you receive federal funding and you're liable to follow the Civil Rights Act, okay? Anti-discrimination policies. How is that going to come out? Because we know with these things being banned, there are going to be some discriminatory and targeting practices taking place, right? And so I could equally argue that I don't want my son learning about dead and venerated and celebrated white Confederate heroes of the Civil War who lost, right? And I can equally argue that I don't want my children learning from a Eurocentric perspective with that is devoid any part of who they are and what they're saying, and that they're offended by that.
That's good.
So
that's real talk. And honestly, I in Tulsa, we had our whole situation with getting rid of the Confederate schools, the names of Confederate schools. And I'm so happy that we did that. But when I learned that Wheeler was still on the name of, a Georgia school, where there are students that put together a petition to get the name removed from their own school that they attend, and then to couple that on with the banning of critical race theory, like it still blows my mind that we're in 2021. We just had the centennial of the massacre. We've already had a Black president of the United States. We have our first vice president that happens to be a woman of color, who I got to meet, by the way, which is just absolutely amazing. Still shocked by that moment. But that's neither here or there. We still have the names of Confederate soldiers on school buildings. It's unbelievable. But I do want to hit up one of these comments that one of the parents left. And this is probably definitely a conservative viewpoint, but I want us to be able to speak to her and like remember what I said. So we're not here to demonize any parents. So Kadada, she's still on standby. So just know, there we go. So this is what this parent wrote. I've heard this argument at tons of school board meetings across the country. The facts are clear that treat people based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Quit making kids feel like they are oppressed or an oppressor. They're innocent kids, you sick people. So let's talk about it. Like, who wants to speak to that person that is feeling that? Go ahead, John.
I think Comfort had her hand up first. I saw you with the little church finger, so yeah, go.
Go ahead, Comfort. Oh, Comfort, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. Okay, I'm looking at this through a former elementary school teacher, and it's been a minute since I've been in the classroom. But whenever this initially came up, I just thought, what? CRT? Like, we don't even teach the actual stuff that's happened. We teach the Renaissance, but we don't teach the Harlem Renaissance. We have people in Tulsa that don't even know their own history.
Yeah.
Like we have done extreme injustice to our kids by not teaching them the basic facts of things that have happened. We can't even get to the critical point because we haven't even taught the stuff. We keep whitewashing it. I don't know how much more whitewashed it could get. I really don't. And I've been in the classroom. I've seen it. We're not teaching these things. So these things about, oh my gosh, the kids are going to be so affected. Don't worry. It's not being taught. It's not.
That's really, that, you know what, that's actual real talk. So like if you're a conservative like district, the chances of them actually going into and having a conversation like Vivette Dukes brought up at the beginning of the broadcast are probably not going to happen. You're probably in a very red space to where you don't have to necessarily worry about that. So in Oklahoma, of course, you know, we live in the reddest state in the entire country. However, we do have like our little blue zones where, you know, folks are being pushed around by the governor. And I'm assuming that now in Georgia is really interesting to me. And y'all know I have been just intrigued by how in one county, Gwinnett County, you know, you have a school board that has control of whether critical race theory is going to be taught or not. But one thing that will be taught is the wholeness of history because of the way that that board is structured. But right next to, not even, you know, a few miles, you have Cobb County, which, you know, they ban critical race theory. They're putting all types of policies in place. They're not addressing the complaints that Black and brown parents have put forth about the racism that has taken place and the racism that they've experienced. And they still have Confederate names of schools. So it's just really interesting. Like, I mean, we couldn't be any more polarized than the way that we are now. So I didn't know if Jennifer or John wanted to speak to that at all, or.
Yeah, Susco and I work together a lot on different subjects. And first I wanted to say that I actually agree with part of that comment that you brought on the screen. The part that I agree with is that I'm sick too. I'm sick of all of this because I think that it's nonsense. And the reality is that how can you say that people are not judged by the color of their skin when it's more difficult for you to get a job interview if people think that you're Black? It's more likely to be treated more harshly for the same types of behaviors in terms of discipline if you are Black or brown, right? Or if you are from certain Asian demographics as well, right? There are definitely social advantages and disadvantages that come with how we show up in the world and how others perceive us, along with whatever baggage they associate with us. And it's okay for us to be able to have that conversation, and it's okay for us to acknowledge that because you are lighter skinned, right? People are likely to give you the benefit of the doubt in situations where there is uncertainty. And that stuff compounds, it adds up, and it creates opportunities. And sometimes it explicitly eliminates opportunities from other people because they don't have that same privilege. So I think we really need to be able to have that conversation. And I try to really engage in that in a way that opens the door for people like that individual to be able to have a conversation. But that's not what they really want to do. A lot of times they just want to they have a vested interest in the way that things are. So they just want to eliminate anything that could potentially change that. So we need to be honest about that. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of like organizing in the county, that's a few counties over from Gwinnett. I think that what's really interesting is that where we live went blue, right? And It's been going blue for some time. Same thing with Gwinnett. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that I guess the next level of focus has to be on really reading and rewriting power, because there are definitely individuals throughout the district who want to push for change, who are actively working towards change, who are advocating for things that are creating that are actively working towards equity. However, there is a core of people, the good old boys, who are doing everything that they can to maintain power as it is and as it has been for some time. And there's only so much longer that they can hold on. But I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there has been a ton of growth and progress being made. And I think that when you talk about growth and change, there are pains that are associated with that. Yeah. And this is a part of that process. So we need to acknowledge that, hey, there are some times where it's going to be hard, but we need to make sure that when we're strategizing very intentionally, we're making sure that we're pouring our energy into restructuring the way that power is set up in a way that is more beneficial towards those who have been historically marginalized.
Yeah, can I add? Now I want to add this for thought. Now the thing that made this really interesting to me is I expected Gwinnett County to have a progressive school board, right? But I also, and I'm not from the area. I expected for Cobb County to also be progressive because on the national news, we're all like, oh, wow, Georgia's blue. And, these 5 counties are responsible for, the election of Joe Biden. But then when I dug down into the school board meeting, it's not progressive. And what is that an indication of? It's an indication that we are not paying attention enough to school board elections. That is what that is a big indication of.
Yeah,
the comment about the content of our character, one indication that I can say we'll know that we're there is when we wake up and we don't have to put our race in a box. Okay. Then you can judge me by the content of my character, and you can call me Christina all day long and refer to my children by their name and get to know them for who they are. But every time I go to the doctor, the bank, and everywhere else and everything else, I have to check a box that says my race. So who constructed that? I didn't, but I have to follow that rule. And that was what established the culture and the society that we live in. And so if people want to advocate for humanity and the content of character, I want them to pull up and talk about that. Like, who's going to change the applications? Who's going to change the application criteria? And then if we start talking about that, is that, an attack too, right? Are we attacking something then?
And can I jump in here for a minute too, just to reference what our friend, a good friend of the National Parents Union, had to say about using that particular quote. Her name is Bernice King and is an expert on the subject. She says, using my father's color of skin content of character quote to prevent teaching on racism and on comprehensive history reflects intentional distortion of his authentic dream, which included eradicating racism, militarism, and extreme materialism, and it's unconscionable. So can we stop that? Like, I think she's been pretty clear on the abuse of that quote, especially in this conversation.
Yeah.
I want to share something also as a Black Jewish woman. I must say, and also as an educator in our Jewish community, I teach Jewish children, and we talk about the Holocaust at a young age. They learn about their experiences of the experiences of Jewish people at an elementary school level, middle school level, and high school level. Of course, it's scaffolded. It's taught with care and intentionality. There's support systems that surround in terms of psychological and emotional support for these students as they explore these very difficult topics. But this is taught in the school system. And why is it taught? It's taught because if it is not addressed and if we don't understand what we experienced, history will continue to repeat itself.
Yeah.
So although we can learn about the difficulties of the oppression and the Holocaust of the Jewish people, although we can talk about and learn about slavery, we can also understand and embrace this is the facts of our history. These are the facts. But we also can recognize how triumphant we are and explore the joy of who we are as a people, as Black people, as Jewish people. We understand that we are resilient, we have overcome, and in addition to learning about the historical facts and all of the oppression we have gone through, we also understand the joy of being who we are. And it's so important for us to teach and balance out both of these things. And then we also see when we teach about, Jewish history and our Jewish experience, the Jewish community will not allow history to repeat itself by any means necessary. Yeah. And I think it's so important. And that is really based on the foundation of understanding our past and our present so that the future is better for our community. And so I think there are some lessons learned there. And when we look at Germany, the United States has some opportunities as well. You know, it's outlawed to have the Nazi flag, and yet the Confederate flag is flown freely in the United States of America. This symbol of hate, this symbol of oppression, this symbol of racism, white supremacy, bigotry. It's everywhere. And so we have some opportunities to learn about, our history, and also understand that, let's learn from Germany. What are they doing? How can we, learn about our history and have our museums to, really address the hard historical facts, and also, create some barriers around outlawing the Confederacy and outlawing these Confederate monuments, outlawing the Confederate. I think there's a place and a space for that history to be taught. But at the same time, that symbol should not be, in my opinion, just like Germany, we should kind of follow in that line.
Right.
But it's so important to us to not erase people. So our indigenous Americans, our Black Americans, Hispanic Americans here in the United States, it's so important for us to make sure that people are represented and they are not made invisible. They are not erased. And so I think that as a policy maker, it's important for us to ensure that we have policies in place in our school system, that we hold our superintendents accountable, and that we ensure that our teachers have the resources they need to ensure that everyone is seen, heard, represented, valued, celebrated, protected, and all of that. No one should be erased or made invisible. And so I encourage you all, our teachers who are on this call, people who are listening, regardless of what is said out in the public, regardless of any laws or policies, you are in your class. As an educator, for me, when I see people in my class, I will make sure that no one in my class feels like they are not present. They all belong. So the education that I teach in my classroom is going to make sure that I teach you your history, and then I also celebrate who you are. I uplift you as a human being because I am invested in your success. I'm invested in how you will make this world a better place. And you won't do that unless you know who you are. Understand that. When you understand that, we're going to make the world a better place.
That is good. That's fire. Yeah, I always love having you on whenever we have these conversations, because you always challenge people and you always make me think about my Jewish roots too. So a lot of folks, I mean, like, y'all, we so American, and half the folks don't even realize that we want to be American, but we absolutely love our blackness, our brownness, our redness, you name it, our indigenous, those are the things that make us, proud to be American. I recently found out that my third great grandfather was a Jewish man. And then when I saw a picture of him, I was like, man, that man he is definitely not Black. And he is from Germany, which, was really interesting. And so, that is the reason why I always, I fight for everybody, because you just never really know who you're akin to if you're born in this country. So let's continue. I want to challenge, some of the listeners out there. We got about 15 minutes left in this conversation. Make sure you share this video out, because I believe that, folks need to hear from folks who have a wide perspective on what critical race theory actually is. But I want to ask you, and this is for our I'm just gonna throw it out there. If you have a kid, right? Your white child comes home and they say, "Mom or Dad, I went to school. I didn't learn that Black folks were enslaved, and that they were, and that the Klan was running around terrorizing and lynching people, and are white people bad?" Like, how do you, and this happens, we know that this is happening, right? Not that the teacher was demonizing the white kid, but this is just, the kid has this collective guilt that suddenly they're awoken to. How do you have that conversation? And I want to hear from our non-nominated parents.
You say you want to hear from non-melanated parents?
Yeah, Peter White is about to speak to the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. Because we live in a neighborhood that's mixed, and we go to the neighborhood school that is mixed, and we live in a neighborhood adjacent to Greenwood, and so and in a neighborhood where down the street is a church that had a reputation to be a great church, and so all of this is in the story of where we live, and so I want to ask my kids lots of questions about what are their teachers saying, what are their friends saying. Why do you, how did that make you feel when the teacher said that? And I think I really love our teachers that my kids have. I feel like they're really supportive of our kids and the community. And I don't want to be a burden to them in trying to police everything, every little snapshot that, crumb that I get from my kids. Wait, what are you teaching my kids? Because it's hard enough to be a public school teacher in Oklahoma. I don't want to add more to that to them. I want to trust them that they're doing the best for our kids and our community. I really love this comment I got from Isabel Wilkerson about how when I go to the doctor, the very first thing I need to do when I go to the doctor is provide a family history, a detailed medical history. And I have to tell the truth about that. If my grandpa had heart disease, if there's, a history of depression or suicide or alcoholism, like I can't hide any of those things, even if they're uncomfortable for me, because if I don't tell the truth, I can't get an accurate diagnosis about how to get better and do better. And I love that illustration in terms of I need tools to tell the truth about what's happened and what's happened in my community and what has happened to us, and so that we can build something better together and move forward.
So I'm gonna push on that a little bit harder on this question, right? And Comfort, if you want to pop in, you can. Your kid is going, let's just say hypothetically speaking, 10 years from now, and I'm sure your kid is probably going to end up at Booker T. Washington High School because your kid is in the pipeline, right? You go to Emerson, there's a good chance they might end up going there. But your kid comes home and they say, Dad, look, we didn't have this conversation. Mom, we didn't have a conversation about slavery, right? Like, and they tell you, I feel guilty. How do you address that situation? Because we already know that there's lawsuits already being filed across this country with kids having conversations about Ruby Bridges in Tennessee, right? And they're filing lawsuits because the kid then came home and said, hey, I feel uncomfortable in this conversation, like how do you think white parents should be explaining that to their parents or to their kids? Like what does that conversation look like?
It's going to be different because every parent is different. I know for my own kids, like that we've already had these conversations. We've been having them as conversations for literally years. That's what white parents need to be doing, is having these conversations all the time. And I don't know that any kid is coming home and being like, I feel guilty as a white kid that my ancestors did this. If they are, okay, let's take some social responsibility. How can we take our white privilege and parlay this into building people up? Mm-hmm. It's not hard. But I do believe it is the kid, like with all of this, the crazy thing is, it's like, if we don't start teaching this stuff, that it just is going to repeat itself over and over and over with every single generation. We have to reach the kids, and we have to have the kids teaching the kids. So it's all about those uncomfortable conversations, because that's where the change happens, in the uncomfortability. That's where the evolution happens. These are conversations that white parents need to be having with their kids from the beginning. Mm-hmm.
Can I speak real quick on a situation that happened in 2019? So I had Black students in the county right here where I'm at in California who had to sit through Huckleberry Finn. Okay. Huckleberry Finn reading. So let's talk about that, because that does impact our kids in the lower than higher education levels. Nobody is actively saying, hey, we don't want to read Huckleberry Finn to your kids either, right? And then I had seniors that showed up in that year and had to walk past, Black seniors, a Confederate flag that was painted on the senior stall, because the parents said that their kid like Dukes of Hazzard and they can do whatever they want, right? And so what is the impact on our children and their friends? I'm sure they do have friends in that environment, even though they were probably 1.5% of, you know, the students there. But what does that impact do? What do you think your children or our children would feel sitting there day after day, hearing the N-word through Huckleberry Finn, then having to do presentations on it and walking past Confederate flags painted on the sidewalk and having to be silent about that? And who's showing up for them? You know?
Yeah. That you know, that's real talk. And so I just, you know, that reminded me of the time when I was in high school. And I went to high school. My dad was in the military. I lived all across the country. I went to high school in Fairfax County, Virginia, which at the time, you know, Fairfax County was like the third wealthiest school district in the entire nation. It's just outside of Washington, D.C., just south of the Beltway. And I remember there was a kid who had this very racist T-shirt on. It was a white kid. And I complained about it. And nothing happened to this kid. The kid continued to wear that shirt to school every single day. And I just remember how it made me feel. It really made me feel, you know, like my life didn't matter, right? And so I became withdrawn. I'm not saying that was the only thing that made me feel, and I don't want to say ashamed or oppressed, but somewhat isolated. It was a majority white, affluent school in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And I was one of the only Black faces in the sea of many white faces. Yeah. So Anthony, we haven't heard from you. Well, how are you doing? All right?
I'm doing great. I'm just learning so much from the panel. And I would like to add that, you know, this as a history teacher, one of my goals is to foster critical thought. And when you look at bills like House Bill 1775, it completely shuts down the concept. It goes against the goals of public school education. And what this is a response to is challenges to American exceptionalism. And I believe that American exceptionalism and critical thought cannot exist in the same place. And you know, we're looking at two different narratives here. Like one narrative that looks at documentation. It looks at Supreme Court decisions. It looks at miscegenation laws, Jim Crow, legalized housing discrimination, labor disputes. And it shows clear evidence of this in American history. But the revisionist narrative is the one that's being pushed here by Republican pundits. It's one that is indifferent to the experiences of anyone that is not part of the majority. I just want to, just if you take a look at it at an analogy, I really like the analogy that you brought up, Peter, because I have one just similar. I'll be brief. Imagine a couple that has really struggled with their relationship. Since the inception of their relationship, there were red flags there. But still, they managed to work through some of those and stay together. But eventually, that couple had a dispute that split them up. Then they managed to come back together, but never really reconciled those differences. And then here we are today with unreconcilable differences, and this couple really needs help. Now, if that couple goes to therapy, and one spouse is saying, like, here's the text messages, here's the handwritten letters, here's the things he said to me, here are videos, recordings of how I'm being treated. And they share that with the therapist, but the other spouse decides that, you know, I'm going to shut this conversation down. This conversation is going to be shut down. My opinion, my point of view is the one that matters here. We're done here. Now, that doesn't foster any kind of progress. Now, what I would suggest to that one spouse, the first spouse, is you move on. You take the kids and you move forward. We keep moving forward. I would love to see the relationship continue to flourish, but if there's not a genuine effort on both sides, I don't know what to say.
William says it's time to divorce. I mean, I think that that's kind of what's happening. And so what does that look like on the ground? And where do we get the tools to be able to do that? And so as some of you know, I'm one of the founding delegates for the National Parents Union in the Southern region, which is why I'm expanding my work in the Georgia area. I do a lot of stuff, y'all, a lot of stuff. But all of the stuff that I do, I'm intentional about making an impact on society. And so one of the things that I really appreciate about, because we're getting ready to close, so I gotta make sure I throw this plug in as well, is the National Parents Union has tools. It also has a program called Every Family Votes, which was also partnered with When We All Vote, right? I believe that is. Did I say that right? When We All Vote. That was the foundation that I believe our former First Lady was a part of putting together. And so I don't know. Can we get a link for that for those who are watching? So it has all types of tools. We also have tools of how to get in contact with your school board leaders, your elected officials. So there are a lot of resources out there, and I'm pretty sure that the National Parents Union isn't the only one. But make sure that you know how to advocate for your community. Everyone on here, they're great organizers. Any last closing thoughts before we end this program? And we'll start off with, let me see, where should we start? Who should we start? Who wants to start? Who wants to be the first to close the argument today? Closing statements. Jennifer, let's go with you.
Okay. I don't know if it'll like really be a good wrap up sentence, but just something I want to make a point that was addressed before when we talk about, you know, whether or not kids need to be talking about this or are impacted by this. As counselors, you know, we have to keep up with research, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, we're talking about that a lot lately, but they put out a statement on the impact of racism and child and adolescent health. There are mental health impacts that Black kids and kids of color experience because of racism. So you can't say that, you know, they're not experiencing that. I don't know the identity of the commenter who said that, but there is research. And one thing that John and I were advocating for several years at our school board, one thing I would bring up is that the suicide rate of elementary Black students had been increasing. And so the work that we do is addressing the mental health effects of racism that comes from implicit and explicit ways. So you can't just say that, no, they're not experiencing it, because they absolutely are. And they can't learn, obviously, like what you were talking about, Nehemiah, how that impacted you. You know, they see these things, they hear these things. And so we're trying to act in a preventative way, teaching everybody about their identity and what you might experience. And for the guilt question, I'm not a parent, but I did have a student in one of my lessons ask me, you know, Ms. Susko, do you feel guilty as a white person, you know, who here like inflicts this on people? And I said to them, my white students, all my students, no, I don't, because that doesn't help us get closer to justice. What do we do if we see an injustice? Because that's part of my curriculum. That's part of what I teach. So if you're white, like Ms. Susko, what do we do? What would we do if we saw something that was racist? And we've already had that conversation, like Comfort was saying. So they know that as white people, well, we would definitely speak up. We would be an upstander. You know, we would talk. We would fight policies. My elementary kids know how to talk about that. So I think that's a good way for white parents to think about it. You know, just from a school counseling advice perspective, is like there's no reason for them to feel guilty. They're not doing it. Just as long as they know, if they see it, what to do to make sure that we don't do it again.
Wow, that's good talk. That's good. Who's up next? Christina? We should just go in order.
So I want the parents and families to understand that it is a mandate of colonization to force uniform ideas, thoughts, and traditions. And so when you see that attempt to control, to create that uniform ideology, that uniform type of thing, know that that is a mandate of colonization. And what we're saying is that if we don't need this, then make sure our legal freedoms match our experience of freedom. Because we know that it doesn't, right? And until our legal freedom match our experience of freedom, we're going to continue to pursue justice. And I'm not just throwing that word justice around. That means making sure things are right and then fair, right? Putting it right and then putting it fair. And right now, in this big attempted reset, what is trying to be, what they're trying to establish is a new principle, or that is based on old principles, to say this is the way that culture and community is supposed to operate. Again, that colonization mandate, right? And so we got to continue to fight back. You know, we got to continue to say, no, here's the truth. My children will know the truth. I am concerned, though, about children that will be coming back into the educational environment that have set with parents who hold these ideologies, who have fostered and developed this type of mentality in their house over the past year, who have spoken probably ill and have this bad thought process. What have the children learned in that year that they're going to bring into the educational environment, and how are our children going to be able to relate to that? And so I hope that you teach your children a defense, and that they don't just shut down like Nehemiah talked about, because that is what our children have done, and we need to stop that. And so that's pretty much, you know, where I stand with the parents and families. Reach out to us, National Parents Union. Thanks for having us on.
Comfort.
I could say a lot of things. But the main thing is the one I've been saying for a really long time. White people, do something. And that's all I'll say.
All right. Gary Rodriguez, President.
Well, I'm going to once again yield my time to the same incredible Black woman who really sums it up for me, again, Bernice King. And she said, there is no teaching on the horrors and the myriad of monstrous manifestations of white supremacy and racism that will be palatable to white supremacists and racists. So, like, let's just keep our heads on straight. Like, are we ever going to be convincing white supremacists and racists who have shown themselves and are showing up and identifying and letting us know where they are? Are we ever going to convince them that the time has come for the truth to be told? Probably not. So to all of you, you know, who are on this panel, and anybody who's listening, who cares about education justice and our children and the future of this country, please keep your eyes on the prize. There is so much work to be done. And while I deeply, and Jennifer, I got to say to you, you are a warrior on the front lines, girl. Like, I see you and just have so much love and appreciation for you. Like, this work is hard and it is not ending. It is not ending. And we've got a lot of work to do, but just keep in mind, you know, what we're up against, and that is evil and people who are not going to be easily convinced to yield.
That's good. And I don't know if y'all know, but Dr. Bernice King, she actually spoke at one of the National Parent Union town halls. We also had Dolores Huerta and some other incredible activists. Those are the type of influencers that come and teach and train some of our parents at the National Parents Union. Vivette Dukes.
I want to use my time right now to really encourage the parents, because we're at a juncture now in education where your voice will rock this whole thing. Teachers can do a role. Jennifer, I too left the classroom. You left counseling, I left the classroom, because guess what? I have a duty to do. Dr. Teresa, you said it. I have a duty to do. I know what I'm supposed to do as a teacher in the classroom. And in any way, shape, and form where those constraints start to get to the point where you're trying to stifle my voice and cause, what are you talking about? I can't. There are things on the books that say you cannot say the word racism. And if a teacher says the word racism, then the district can be fined $1 million. What country are we living in right now, people? Wake up. Parents, I'm charging you, because you can go in the school and say, no, absolutely not. Because guess what? The anti-CRT parents, they absolutely are.
They are.
They absolutely know their rights, and they absolutely are doing it. So to the parents on the flip side of that coin, where are you? I'm going to need you to step up. I'm going to need you to attach yourselves with the National Parents Union, because we have help for you. I'm going to need you to find organizations on the ground. You have a plethora of organizers and disruptors right here on this panel, but some way, shape, or form, get yourself aligned with this organization so we can support you, because it's not just going to go away. And if you hear an elevation in my tone, it's on purpose. This is not just going to go away. I need to make that very clear. Part of your back to school reimagination needs to move beyond pencils and crayons. Oh, it's a lot more than that going down. The educational system does not want our children to learn how to think. Children that are the most oppressed by the system, they do not want them to learn how to critically think. That is what the disruption and the fight against CRT is all about. Don't think. Don't think. Just do what we tell you to do. Follow orders, lockstep, march in line, so I could take you right from school into prison. That's the agenda. Get with the program. Get some help. Thank you, Tafshir. Know your power, and let's get at these people and disrupt the status quo.
That's good. Peter.
I get to follow that. Thank you so much for that. I think I want to continue, for myself, I want to continue learning how to ask disruptive questions, both of my kids and to other parents I encounter that might bring me questions about, what do you think about this CRT stuff? I hear they're doing this at our school. And I can say, well, tell me more. What do you mean by that? What's going on?
Dr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you. So my closing remarks would be to ask people who are listening to this session to please support the recruitment, the election of school board representatives. It's so important that you get the right people on the school board who can boldly and audaciously fight for all of our students. So please do not, and I think Nehemiah, you mentioned this earlier, do not sleep on the local elections. The local elections are so important. They impact your daily lives. And as we see the attack on the school boards, people are very much aware how important the school boards and the school system, educational system is. So at a local level, it is so important that we do not sleep on this and that we become actively engaged in our school board elections. And I also challenge you all, for our parents and our community members, to hold accountable your elected school board members. You voted them in, you supported them, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable not to be politicians, but to actually fight for what's right for the people. And hold them accountable. Support, go to the school board meetings, speak about what you need and what you expect of your school board. Go to the school board meetings and talk about your values and how you need your school system to support the education and the equitable education for all of our students. Contact your school board via email, call them, go to those school board meetings, show up, because a lot of us are not showing up. We need to show up, speak out. It's very, very, very important that you do that, because your voice matters, and parents and the people, you have the power. School board members are elected by the people. We report to the people. The people are our bosses. The people have the power. Use your power. The other thing I would say to everyone is, when we talk about structural and systemic racism, we often talk about organizations and say, oh, well, the organization is racist or the school system is racist. But we have to understand that the institution of racism consists of individuals. So I encourage you all to focus on, as an individual, the work you have to do as a person who is a contributing member to this society. Do the individual work, study. Don't keep asking Black and brown people what I need to do and what I learn and all of that. We have enough we have to deal with in this society. And some of us, we are, paid to educate you, but some of us aren't. And if we're not paid to educate you, don't come at us asking us for help. Do the research yourself, study, learn, do as much as you can to be an anti-racist, because you come into this system and you create the system. The system is not some, something we can't touch and feel. You part of the system. You created the system. Deal with the system. And then lastly, I would say to my teachers, look, and our support staff, support your students. Regardless of what anyone says, I don't care about the laws and the policies. At the end of the day, I'm going to do what's right? Because I'm going to bring up the Holocaust again, but we had a history in our Jewish history that talks about how, there were laws and policies against, the Jewish people, but yet there were people who still said, I will defy this law because I'm a human being and I will make sure that these people are protected, that their lives matter. So I will do whatever I can to make sure that they are not invisible and they are not erased. And we have to do that as educators, as teachers in the classroom. No one deserves to be erased and made invisible. Be committed to that regardless of whatever happens. Make sure your children feel like they belong. And then the last thing I would say is just courageously fight for what's right. Do what's right, uplift our students. Anthony, you made a great analogy around don't get a divorce or whatever. I like that analogy, or maybe get a divorce. But what I want to tell you all is don't get a divorce, right? I say, let's stand up, fight back, right? So we got to fight for equity and justice. So I highly encourage you all to fight for the future of this nation, fight for the future of the world, because our children matter. They are valued, and we're going to fight. We're going to fight for what's right. And that means everyone benefits. Everyone will benefit when everyone has what they need to not only survive, but thrive.
That's good. Good. All right, Anthony.
Yes, I love being able to follow that energy, Doc, because I'm very passionate about this. And I have made a good faith effort to look into the concerns of the people who have, who support House Bill 1775. But in days and days of research, I found nothing but fear and sensationalism. And that is not what America should be about. With House Bill 1775 and anything like this that we're seeing across the nation is really, in my humble opinion, is just a call to arms for a certain segment of the far right. It's this politics and linguistic strategy. It's carefully formulated to galvanize Trump supporters. And make no mistake about this. This is a power play that is in direct conflict, or to use to combat Black Lives Matter, identity politics. And it is to regain control, like Nehemiah said. This is a play to regain control of local, state, and federal legislatures. Now, this is a virtually non-existent threat. You are not going to go into classroom and seeing loving, trained educators teaching kids that one race is better than another. And if you do find that, I will help you remove that person. This is a virtually non-existent crisis put together by the Republican Party, and they are playing off the fear and lack of intellectual curiosity of a certain portion of their base. Now, somehow these political pundits have convinced certain segments of the Republican Party that they are the real victims of racism. Now, I don't know how you can logically argue with someone who believes that, and I'm sorry, I can't do it. But what I am here to do is I am here to make sure that your children understand that critical thought is crucial in order to solve our current and future problems. Thank you for letting me be here.
Thanks for being on. John, close us out.
Man, honestly, I think we need to reframe what it means to be American. And I think that life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, protection from tyranny, these are things that truly are written into the values of what it means to be American. And those are the things that we should espouse and uplift. I also think that social justice is what will help us get to the place where we can realize those aspirational values. And there's no such thing as having social justice if you don't have the economic means to secure it and the political means to protect it. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge that since the 70s, we've seen a split in the way that profits have been separated, right? Wages have remained static, but this country has continued to produce more and more. And that money is increasingly going to the ultra wealthy. And we're also in the midst of a political system where campaign financing laws make it possible to buy it, right? So I think that's important when we say things like, let's go vote. And we need to make sure that, I think when we're saying those things, we're asking questions like vote for what and vote for who, and who is able to run and who is limited from running. And I think we need to push for issues like a living wage. $15 minimum wage would be an excellent step in the right direction. And since we're talking about critical race theory, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that since a disproportionate amount of Black, brown, and beige people are working service and lower skilled jobs, something like a living wage would benefit a lot of people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color. So I think we need to make sure we're looking at things through a critical lens and make sure that we are considering that intersection between social, economic, and political justice, because that is going to be the way forward, because there are so many people that are capable of running, capable of holding office, capable of doing amazing things in this world, but they got to work 2 jobs, right? Or they're a single parent and they don't have support, right? Or they have to work a job that has no dignity, right? And they are dealing with schedules that are inconsistent, and they're dealing with people who do not treat them right. And we need to acknowledge all of these complex issues and where they intersect, so that if we want to really create an America that truly is exceptional, we can put those things in place, and everyone who really wants to experience life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness truly has access to those things.
Excellent. So I want to thank all of the parents and the advocates and educators who joined us this evening. Reach out to me anytime. I am here to help shake some trees for y'all, especially in Cobb County. We're coming after that school board. So thank you so much. I'm going to bring Kadada back on. Kadada, how did we do? Did we do okay?
I think everyone did just fine. One woman had her moment. She had her moment, but that's okay. She had the opportunity to have her moment. And I was over here thinking, see, this is what happens when you were attending colonizers' church in a different kind of way, because then you want to erase color, right? But I think one of the challenges with these conversations is when you're speaking to the choir. You're literally speaking to the choir. We know what we need to do. We need to have more motivation. And as a political consultant, it is really, really important to really dispel the myth that the school board elections are just the most simplest things to do. It's hard work, because we're literally raising children in spaces where parents don't raise children. And that is vitally important to understand. I would also say that to my white sisters and brothers, this is your journey. It really is. And to have conversations with your children about, if you feel guilty, it's okay to say yes. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say, I don't know, because you probably have never thought about it. And when your child comes to you and has that question, all you can do is talk about your response and your understanding of what has occurred. The sad thing is that most white people don't even know the type of harm that has been done to other white people. So that way they don't have a relational kind of thing to build on. Right. And it's unfortunate. So go vote, run for office, you know, and keep talking. And I will say to my Black and brown bodies that are wearing the capes to kind of keep this work going, I'm also going to challenge you and say, you may want to step aside a bit, because power, true power, sometimes doesn't come in the form of numbers. It comes in form of allyship. Let other white people speak up, because I have a phrase, I call it white on white crime. This is where we're going to see the battles happening.
Yeah,
that's what Black and brown people, they're not listening to us anymore. They don't, because they already know what we're going to say. They already know what we're going to do. But when white people start talking to white people about their privilege, about their money, about what it looks like who lives on the street, then that's when change comes, because they're being challenged from what they determined to be the norm, right? Mm-hmm. That whole desperate housewives mentality goes away, because now, wait, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in this. I see that there's some destruction. I see that. So we have to learn, because I live in the world of power. Conflict, resolution, and power go hand in hand. And when you are in a cycle of this type of conflict repeatedly, every day, it's just a different shade, it's just a different name, it's just a different strategy. You have to step back, and you have to let the white people battle this out. And you can be on the back burner and watch and guide and advise, because they already hear us. They know our strategy book. I'm gonna tell you, they already know our strategy book. And so that's the thing, that when you are working through change and trying to get something different to occur, your strategy book has to change.
Yeah.
When you have more white allies at the front for you, and that doesn't mean that the power is no longer ours. It's like going into divorce court without a lawyer.
You say that too, because a lot of people forget that, you know, they're allies. You know, they're sharing power with you.
Yeah, and like I was saying, you know, if you want to obtain power in a divorce, please don't. You have to get a lawyer. Never go into the legal space without a lawyer, because you're not going to know. You're not going to understand the culture. White people understand white people culture. They understand the language. They know what they do. They know how they rock every day. Let them talk to each other about it. And white people, when you do that, you can't be combative, because then you automatically remove yourself from where you came from. And that's going to be a problem too. So if we can, Vivette, girl, yes, they do. They understand. They do in places where we can't get. So it is a pleasure. It is an honor. It's a pleasure. And we have a lot of work to do. And I promise you, 50 years ago, the same conversation was being had.
I bet it was. Well, thank you so much for being there. Thank you for hopping on this with 2 days notice. I really appreciate you, sister. And for all of those people out there, you know, check out the National Parents Union. The Black Wall Street Times is a free news publication. Make sure that you apply to that. We are pushing to go national. We are more than just a publication. We are, I would say, an activist force of journalism here. And we're always rooting on people like Jennifer and John, and we're trying to support them in their work. And then also, of course, you may have seen it, you may have heard about it. I spoke a little bit about it on MSNBC when I was on there during the centennial. The Black Wall Street Times is Greenwood 100, which is pretty much our own 1619 project of our community. So that is available for purchase for $20. If you can't afford it and you want that magazine, just hit me up via email or find me on Instagram, and I'll make sure that you get a copy of that book. Thank you so much, you all, for joining us this evening.